Perfect.
Hey, everybody, look at us in our bedrooms apart. We are here to make you laugh and learn. And, you just got to get to know these people that come on this show. That's all I got to say. I've got a superstar, and he interviews
Oh,
superstars. I mean, what
no,
can he told me to say this Tommy,
no.
throwback, Kovac, pop culture nerd, podcaster, podcaster extraordinaire. Sometimes he's a comedian and he's a belly button enthusiast. I don't know if that's innie or outie. And we're going to talk. He's got things he wants to talk about, like a Hollywood show, rock music, and the biggest star he had for his 2400th interview. 2400 interviews and still going strong. Welcome him right now to the stage, Tommy Kovac. Woo!
Woo! It's great to be back here, gorgeous Linda. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm covering up all the facial flaws, got to do that. Us women, we got to be peacocks for the men. How are you
Well, it's great
doing?
to be back. I am fantastic. I'm a little pissed though because I'm so bright here on camera. I've been toying with this new laptop on Zoom for a while now. I'll get the hang of it eventually, but right now you can see me. I look like I'm in a frickin' movie right now.
You look like you're in a Milk of Magnesia ad.
I never saw those.
Is that a pink room?
No, this is a white room.
Looks pink. I should talk. This looks like a Hershey bar.
Yeah, it does.
Then I got a teddy bear up there.
Oh, it's cute.
Thank you. He watches over all my interviews lately.
Oh,
Yeah. Sometimes he gets bored and he just looks out the window.
yeah.
You know you're boring me if he looks out the window. So what's
Yeah.
going on? And tell people where you're at, where you live, what you do before we get into who you really are. Tell them what you do when you're not doing your things.
Well, I'm not doing much when I'm not podcasting. I'm usually, I'm always doing research, always, and lately I've been dieting and I've been going for walks 45 minutes a day. And if you notice, I look a little thinner than I would. And that's basically what I've done, when I'm not podcasting, but I'm always constantly podcasting and doing research. That's just been my life the last 8 years, and it's just been phenomenal.
Yes, you are such a Let's talk about the podcasting. Tell
Okay.
tell tell me, like, you're walking down the street, you do stand up sometimes, you live where you live, and then you grab a computer and you start interviewing celebrity. Tell people about that. I know I still want to hear more about it.
Yeah, well, I haven't been doing much stand up for 7 years now, but when I did do it, I enjoyed doing it. It's just, it's a work ethic and discipline that's not for everybody, and I can't believe I did it for as long as I did. But yeah, when I'm walking down the street, I don't know, I live in a very quiet town of Modesto, California, Um, when I sometimes when I go to autograph shows, like I'm going to mention the Hollywood show in a few, sometimes a person will recognize my voice, and they don't know where it's from, you know, and I think that's the effect that the podcast has, especially when it's audio only, because I don't conform to doing, Zoom podcasts like a lot of people have done, since the pandemic, you know, but yeah, no, I just live a quiet life and that's the way I love it.
Absolutely. So you live in a quiet neighborhood in a quiet town, and your neighbors pretty much leave you alone?
Yeah, I mean, we have very nice neighbors here, and they're very friendly. Every time we're outside the house, they're like, "Hi," and stuff like that. But yeah, they don't bother us. No, this is a very quiet part of town.
So, do some of your neighbors know about the high profile people you've interviewed?
No, it hasn't come up.
Smart.
I just, yeah, ever since I moved here a year ago, it just say, hi, hello, and everything, and like jobs have never come up in the conversation. We're just staying out of each other's business and everything. But if I were to bring it up, I would say, you're probably not going to believe me, but I interview celebrities on a podcast, and stuff, and I have brought it up, over the years to various people I meet, but now I'm at the point now where it's hard for me to bring it up because everybody's got a podcast now. So now it doesn't sound special, it sounds ordinary because so many people are doing podcasts.
True. That's so true. You'll talk to somebody and they'll say, "Oh, you do a podcast." Next thing you know, they're doing a podcast.
Yeah. I haven't run into that, but yes, I get what you mean because it's true.
Yeah. Have you helped other people get their podcast started? That's always fun.
I mean, I have influenced a lot of people to start podcasts that I've interviewed and stuff. A bunch of them have said, "Come on mine." Only a tiny amount of them have actually meant it. I have gone on some, and then there's listeners that are completely batshit crazy that like message me at 2 a.m., and they say, "Hey, can you help me? Can you teach me the ropes to start a podcast and everything?" And I tell them all, just don't talk about it, just do it. But the ones who are absolutely insane, I had to block those ones. And sadly, a couple of them have been doxing me on their podcast and beyond, which we don't need to get into. But that's what's happening now. That's the worst thing about the internet. There's a lot of mental health that's just hasn't been tended to,
Ex-
sadly.
That's so true. That's so true. So, what order do you want to talk about things? Do you want to end up with your podcasting? We opened it up at how you got started. Would you rather go into the Hollywood and other things and come back and end with your podcasting or continue with podcasting right now? I don't want to bore you.
Bored, I know that I've talked about it, in the previous conversations. I don't mind coming back to it at the end,
Perfect.
and letting people know, who I got coming up and stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm down to talk about the Hollywood show because it's fresh. It happened 2 months ago, you
Let's
know.
hear about it.
So the Hollywood show is an autograph show that's been going on in LA since the 70s, like the late 70s. They get 40, 50 celebrities from all walks of life in one room to sign autographs. You'll go there, and on one side of the room, you'll see the cast of Animal House. And then on the other side of the room, you'll see the cast of Lost in Space. Or on another side of the room, you'll see everybody who ever guest starred on Star Trek or Seinfeld. I mean, it is very diverse and it is a nerd's paradise, just an absolute nerd's paradise. Now, I had never gone before, and I wanted to, and I thought because it was my birthday weekend, this was the perfect time to go do it. So, me and my best friend Rudy, who is currently in stuntman school, he wants to be a stuntman, and he's in his early 40s like me, and he's doing it, and he's kicking ass. He just got certified, as a matter of fact. He and I, so we go to LA for the Hollywood show and we had a blast. Oh my God, the people I met there. I met Ted Neely from Jesus Christ Superstar. He remembered our interview from a few years ago, and I am convinced that guy is Jesus. Like, really, he has got to be Jesus. He's been playing him for 53 years. This is actually his last tour as him because he's retiring. And I am just convinced he's Jesus. He's very positive, is never negative, always has a smile on his face, always wants to spread nothing but good to people, everybody he meets. And yeah, I just went over to him and said, "Hey, Ted, I don't know if you remember me, but we talked on the phone on my podcast a few years ago. And the moment I answered the phone, you were like, 'Tommy, can you hear me?' And he remembered that."
Wow.
And it was really, really cool. Yeah, that was a great meeting. And then I met Little Ricky on I Love Lucy. Keith, I always have trouble pronouncing his last name. It's French Canadian, you know. Um, and oh my God, that interaction was hilarious. So I go to his table. He's talking to somebody. His 6-year-old grandson is his special little helper at his table. And he was so cute. Oh my God, so adorable. He looked like him at that age when he was on I Love Lucy, right? And he says to me, I'm his grandson. Can I help you? And I'm like, oh, I want like, a picture with your grandfather and, a signed picture, and he said, $60, please. It was so cute. So I pay him. And then after Keith is done talking to the person, just before I could get a word in edgewise, this dude comes up, early 60s, wearing a sleazy looking dinner jacket, like he's the king shit. And he interrupts us. He's like, hey, Keith, remember I met you the other night at the Paramount party and stuff? And then he says to me, I am so sorry. Hold on 1 second. And I said, out of sarcasm, I said, yeah, he looks pretty important. And so they go to talk for a few minutes there, and then when he comes back to me, he's like, "I am so sorry about that," and it's like, "Oh, it's no problem, no problem." And Keith is a religious Christian, and he was another positive one. So it was very nice meeting Keith. And then I met Mariel Hemingway. Oh my God, she's still gorgeous and fine all these years later. And she was an absolute sweetheart. And I'm trying hard to get her on the podcast. She had surgery like a few days later, so she's still in recovery. So I'm waiting on her for that. Her and I have mutual friends too. I met Billy Gray from Father Knows Best, and he's the kid in The Day the Earth Stood Still. Even though he said he remembered me, I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks that he didn't because he's done so many interviews and he's in his 80s. But who knows? It was still a pleasant interaction. You know, um, I met Babs, Martha Smith from Animal House. She had a long line full of guys. Not surprisingly, it was all guys, and she was just so awesome to talk to for a few moments while she was signing my picture. I told her how I saw Animal House when I was 4 for the first time with my dad, and she was just stunned at how young I was because she hears all the time that guys were young when they started, but 4, she was like, wow, you know, and that was awesome. I met the 3 girls in Wilson Phillips because Carney Wilson's been on the podcast. Um, I got her through her husband, Rob Bonfilio, who's their guitarist. And meeting them was great. Um, let's see, Barbara Luna. Now, she was probably one of the first women in the history of television to show her belly button on TV on Star Trek. In 1967, her and Nichelle Nichols, in this one particular episode, they both showed their belly buttons. And we were talking about that, about what a pioneer she is. And she's so modest about it. She's like, no, no, that is Barbara Eden, on I Dream of Jeannie. I was like, yeah, but they had to reshoot the pilot because, it was so controversial. We couldn't even see it. They had to reshoot the pilot of I Dream of Jeannie, right? So she was playing the modest game there. And then when we took our picture, if you look at her Facebook, when she takes pictures with guys, she likes to have the guys, put their, hands around her waist. She likes to get behind them and stuff, right? Well, she let me touch her belly button while I had my hand on her waist, and it was wonderful, Linda. I cannot tell you how wonderful it was. She seems like she works out. She seemed like she had a 6-pack down there, for a lady of her age, oh my God. It was fantastic. The smiles on our faces said it all in that picture.
I want
I'll
to
tell
see
you.
this picture.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, it was hilarious. And then we did some cool things, like we went to a couple of comedy shows. My friend Don Brody, who you should have on your show, very funny comedian. She has a podcast called HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck. And what she does is she she has the guest pick a monumental moment in history, right? And she breaks it down. And along the way, she finds something sexual in there. And it is a very funny podcast. I got to see a live recording of it at Flappers Comedy Club, right? And I go there. We had a blast just watching this. It was Martin Luther King's birthday. His birthday's or no, not his birthday. The anniversary of when he was shot. That was June 5th, the day before my birthday. So they were doing a breakdown of that on stage. Another guest of mine, Megan Kavanaugh, the funny heavyset girl in The League of Their Own and Robin Hood Men in Tights. I've had her on the podcast. She was there. I just saw her by chance, and we like gave each other a hug and got a picture together afterwards, right? And Jay Leno was doing a show next door. And after the show, I was waiting for him, hoping he was going to come out just so I could say, "Hey, Mr. Leno, how you doing? I'm a huge fan and everything." It didn't happen, sadly. And then Christine Blackburn, who you know, the host of Storyworthy, she was doing a live Storyworthy at the Lyric Hyperion, however you pronounce it. It's this cool little pastry cafe with a venue stage, and that was a lot of fun too. I got to see Christine after the show. And my friend Shelly Herman, another person you should have on your show, she was a page at NBC in the late 70s. And she got to know Johnny Carson and Chuck Barris and all these game show hosts at NBC. She got to do crowd control for all of them, right? She gave me from my birthday actual pens or pencils from Johnny Carson's desk.
What?
And yes, I could not believe this because they looked exactly like they did on TV. You know, they're white with the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson written on them. I was like, I'm going to cherish these forever. Oh
Forever.
my God. I can't believe they're in my hand right now. Yeah, it was the best birthday ever, Linda. Best
What?
birthday ever.
That is incredible. Incredible. Who else
Yeah.
did you meet at the Hollywood thing?
Let's see. The Waltons. I met Judy Norton. She's been on the podcast. Richard Thomas. Oh, he was great. Just the sweetest man. Um, let's see. Christine DeBelle. She was like a blonde-haired it girl in the late 70s. She did the X-rated version of Alice in Wonderland, which I have a funny story about that. That I told her an email when I interviewed her years ago because she did not want to talk about it on the podcast because she had talked about it so many times. And I've told the story on my podcast since. So when I was 7 years old, my grandmother and I went to the video store, and I wanted to watch Irwin Allen's Alice in Wonderland TV movie, which was a 3.5 hour two-parter. And we go to the video store, and we knew all the employees by name. But then this guy who was like brand new there, we didn't know his name or anything. He goes into the back room to find Alice in Wonderland that came up on his computer, right? Well, the back room is where all the porn is, right? So we got Christine DeBelle's X-rated Alice in Wonderland. Okay.
What?
I went home and I popped this in, and after 10 minutes, which had no nudity or nothing, no sex, just plot, after 10 minutes, I got bored and turned this off. I could not stand this, right? So then fast forward to many years later, I go to Google the X-rated Alice in Wonderland and stuff because I wasn't familiar with it at the moment. And then the moment that I saw the White Rabbit, I recognized him from that Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, holy shit, this guy gave a 70-year-old and a 7-year-old a porn tape. This guy should be ashamed of himself, you know? I was like, oh my God. But I told her that story, in email, and she thought it was funny. And when I met her at the Hollywood show, she gave me a free autograph and picture, and she gave me a kiss and everything. I got a lot of kisses this weekend from my female guests that have been on the podcast. It was
Oh,
magnificent.
that's fabulous. What a great benefit.
Yeah,
You know
a
who'd be
benefit.
fun for you to interview that I'd
Ooh,
like to see? Who was
ooh.
an it girl back in the 60s and 70s? Twiggy.
Twiggy, I love Twiggy. Yeah, I don't know if she'd be up to doing it. I do know she has her own podcast. I know that. but I could try. I don't know if it'll be easy, but yeah, it would be great to have her on. It's the 45th anniversary of the Blues Brothers, and I thought her cameo was just hilarious. Aykroyd's trying to get with her, while they're at the gas station, and he's pretending to be the gas station guy. He's like $100. Oh, you want the change? It's pretty funny.
Wow, you are quite the nerd about all the details.
Hmm.
You put me
Yeah,
to shame.
yeah. I mean, if you had Dana Gould on your podcast, he'd probably put you to shame too. That guy knows a lot of stuff as well.
What's
You
his name?
know, Dana Gould, he's a comedian. Yeah, he's also a big time nerd as well. He knows a lot about the old creature feature movies, and he knows about a lot of stuff. I haven't had him on my podcast, but I listen to his podcast all the time and stuff. And he just cracks me up. He can quote anything Adam West has ever said. He's a big Batman fan as well, and he even got to work with him too on The Simpsons and elsewhere.
Wow. Wasn't there another famous actor back in the 70s named Gould?
Well, Elliot Gould, yeah.
Elliot, is he related?
No, no, no. Elliot Gould is Jewish. Dana is not. Dana's like Irish Catholic or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Well, what else happened? Did you get to meet the people at Seinfeld? Because I want to meet Julianne Margulies.
No, there were no Seinfeld guest stars at this one. I was just giving you an example of what they do at the Hollywood show. But no, I was surprised. It's funny because they had Seinfeld guest stars there a couple of years ago. One of my favorite comedians I've interviewed, Jan Karam, was there,
I love her.
and
I just met her.
yeah, I love Jan Karam. She is so damn funny. And she's one of the few comedians I've interviewed I actually make laugh. Like I can comment on her status and say anything and she thinks it's hilarious.
Oh,
And I remember she made me wait a year and a half before she actually came on. And when she did, we talked over 80 minutes and it was just a blast. And she was cracking me up the whole time, you
she
know. And I
is she is really special.
And I don't quote me on this. I think I was her first podcast. I could be wrong, but I think that was her first podcast, if I'm not mistaken,
Oh,
and stuff. I'd like to see her go on Marin. I mean, Marin's on his way out. He announced his retirement in June, which I'm sad about because my Mondays and Thursdays will never be the same again without listening to him. But I can always go back and listen to the back catalog.
yes.
But but yeah, so let's see, who else did I meet at the Hollywood show? I met Stephen Talbot, who played Gilbert on Leave It to Beaver. I had him on the podcast. He was great. I wanted to go meet Jerry Wheel, who played Judy on Leave It to Beaver. There's so many people I didn't get to meet at that show because I was so busy with other people and the lines got long, right? Like Garrett Morris and Lorraine Newman were there for the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. I did not get to meet them, and I'm still sad because that was one of the motivations for going. I'm But at the same time, the lines were just so out the door, and I have a bad leg from my car crash. It's just like I don't really need that stress on my leg, you know what I mean? And
When was the car crash?
10 years ago, it was January 21st, 2015.
What? Tell me about the car crash. You probably told me, but I forgot.
Yeah, it was just another night of drinking. I was at a low point in my life. I was homeless. My best friend had just died in a car crash a few months before. I was just like not even caring about life at that point. And I fell asleep in the passenger seat. The guy fell asleep at the wheel, and we ended up in the middle of the highway. And we got out of the car okay. My hand was cut up. I was sweating. My heart was just racing. I had a little heart attack at one point. And then I completely blacked out. And what happened was a car collided with ours and the impact hit us. I got the worst of the injuries. I was in a coma for 30 days, you know, and to be alive.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you're alive. And it gives you a second chance on life because, I had brain trauma from a drunk driver. So
Oh, yeah,
it gives you a second chance to really do something with your life. And you also
absolutely.
find out who your friends are because if they can't stick around and watch you heal, they're not worth it.
Yeah, I found out big time. Had a lot of confrontations for months, I'll tell you. I had a lot of confrontations leading up to the accident with my drinking and stuff. Not a lot of people didn't want to help me or my mother while we were homeless, and it still saddens me to this day.
Sorry. I'm sorry about that.
We landed on our feet, we got our own house now, and it's just been a blessing, an absolute blessing. You know, I'm hoping by next summer our pool will finally be operational. Right now it looks like a swamp, I'll tell you, but we've just been trying to make time to get it cleaned. You know, we got so much going on, but it's a blessing.
Now, Modesto is just a bit north of San Francisco.
Right. It's over in what we call the East Bay, because the East Bay is like Hayward and Union City and so forth. But then there's the East Bay, which is Modesto, and this is where like, George Lucas filmed American Graffiti and stuff like that. It's partially Modesto, partially in San Rafael. He did the movie, and I think he did a little bit up in San Francisco, but that's where it's what it's known for.
Very cool. Well, you also wanted to talk about your love for rock music. Now,
Yes.
I like rock if it has to do with Neil Diamond.
Oh, my dad saw Neil Diamond open for the Rolling Stones back in 1966 at the Cow Palace. And he got booed off the stage because he wasn't rock and roll, right? So then Jefferson Airplane comes on, and next thing you know, the hippies are dancing because that was their wheelhouse. And that was the first time he ever saw Neil Diamond ever in his life. I don't think he had heard Cherry Cherry or Solitary Man yet, and those were the two hits that he was playing. And that story cracks me up every time. I mean, he was 9 at the time. My aunt was 18, and she's taken him, to that concert. She took him to a few concerts. She took him to see the Beach Boys around that same time, you know, and I told Carney Wilson, my dad's first concert was the Beach Boys when he was, 9, and we had, Beach Boys albums on vinyl. My dad, so he was a rock musician in his early years. He had a rock band. So this is where my love for rock and roll comes from. He had a band called TNA, Tommy and two guys named Alan. It didn't mean tits and ass, and they were a power trio. They did covers of Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and Leonard Skinner, and they did horrible covers, and they did even more horrible original tunes. They were very misogynistic. They did a song called Crank Horse Slut. They did a song called Jet Lag Mama, and just awful songs. I didn't have appreciation for my dad's guitar playing when I was young, but I do now because he doesn't play guitar anymore. But when he was young, he was actually not bad. He tried to teach me some chords, but my fingers are stubby and long, and I couldn't get the grasp of it. I wanted to play drums at one point when I was in middle school because I took a music class, and I played drums in the music class, and my mom would not let me get a drum set because she knew I'd be in the garage, rehearsing all night and banging and waking everybody up. Because my dad, when he had his band, they rehearsed in the garage. And when my grandmother came back to live with us, right, we had to rent a space because she was like, "You all sound like a bunch of fucking idiots. Get out of here." you know? So they rented a space, and I would go with them to watch rehearsals. And there was like a refrigerator with soda in there, and so I was just like drink my root beer or whatever and just watch them, rehearse. And I got to go to one gig they did. It was like it was like a veterans benefit or something, actually. I remember. And I remember there was this lady there. She was like teaching me how to dance. Like I'm 7 years old, she's teaching me how to dance and stuff. And it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun that night.
Wow. So, who's your favorite rock band, or who are some of your top faves?
Let's see, top faves: the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. Def Leppard is a big one for me. I've seen them live. Um, Alice Cooper. I love so many. I can go beyond the top five. I love ZZ Top. I love the Eagles. I love Pink Floyd. Um, I love the Go-Go's, huge Go-Go's fan, the Bengals. Um, Lots of God, there's so many. I love the 50s all the way into at least the early 90s. And then after that, I wasn't a big alternative rock fan. I mean, there are certain songs from my high school years of alternative rock that I love that I could just, go back to, but I don't know like every song from each of the bands. But classic rock is my wheelhouse, and 80s new wave and stuff like that. And I've been so lucky to interview people from all the stuff, over the years.
Wow. What was one of your like okay, classic rock interviews? Give me your top three.
Well, my favorite interview overall was Gina Shock from the Go-Go's because I got her to open up and just be so vulnerable in that interview, you know. But for other musicians, let's see. Well, Cardi Wilson was great. Um, Earlier this year, I interviewed Jim Valley, who was like one of the replacement guitarists for Paul Revere and the Raiders, and he was pretty great having a conversation with him about that time, about how he joined the band halfway through their success, and he got to stay with them a little bit before, towards the end, before, Indian Reservation was their last big hit. And then let's see. I've talked to so many. I've talked to not Randy Jackson from the Jackson Five. I talked to Randy Jackson from the '80s metal band Zebra earlier this year. Um, I talked to Marv Ross from Quarter Flash, their '80s new wave band who did "Heart in My Heart."
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. Um, God, there's quite a number there. You know, I talked to Susie Quattro. You
Wow.
know, it
Wow.
was good it was good for the experience, but if you go watch the documentary about her, you get a pretty thorough diaphragm about who she is, you know. And I loved watching that documentary because, she's saying, I am who I am, and if nobody likes it, they can fuck off, right? And then meanwhile, her sisters are being interviewed and throwing her under the bus. I was cracking up at that, and I know her sister Patty. She's been on my podcast. I love Patty. She's I think she's more fun than Susie, and she's wonderful. But the experience of interviewing Susie Quattro was an interesting one, and it was good overall. I mean, she got to tell me about seeing Robin Williams when she was on the set of Happy Days. He would come by next door from Mork and Mindy, and he would just go into character and fucking crack everybody up. You never knew what Robin was going to say or do.
That's so true. That's so true. So,
Yeah.
so who's somebody that you would like to like in music, in acting, in comedy? Who are some people that have escaped you that you're still trying to crack the code to interview them? Because somebody out here might know how to help you get them.
Right. Oh my God, there's so many for like, for acting, for television. I would like to talk to two crushes I had. One of them was her and I were like going back and forth back in 22, and then she stopped replying after a while, and she hasn't since. Valerie Landsberg from Fame. I She was probably the first Jewish girl I ever had a crush on when I was a kid. And hearing her singing voice and her vulnerability in her singing when she wasn't playing the tough girl on that show, it was just so wonderful. And every time I turn on an episode of Fame now, it melts my heart away. I'd like to get her. I'd like to get Maureen Flanagan, who played Evie on this silly sitcom called Out of This World that I watched when I was a kid. I used to race home just to watch it because I had a crush on her. Um, for musicians, I mean, there's several people here and there from like really obscure new wave bands I'd like. I mean, Wang Chung isn't totally obscure. I'd like to get one of the guys from that band on and stuff. I've reached out, but I haven't heard back. Um, I don't know, just anybody that whose music I like and that I can get who's accessible, really. I mean, I've talked to so many different ones. I mean, I talked to Chris Butler from the Waitresses, and God, so many and stuff. There's this guy, Bruce Woolley. He had a band called Bruce Woolley and the Camera Club. He wrote Video Killed the Radio Star before the Buggles did it, right? He wrote it with those guys, and then he did it first. His version was radically different than theirs. And then the Buggles recorded it, and just it became an iconic song, you know. When I interviewed him, we talked a long time, and I felt like he was giving me a free master class on the history of music. You know, I've talked to him and a couple other guys from New Wave that grew up in the cities in England, right? And their earliest love was the blues because blues became very popular in England when the Stones hit and the Yardbirds and several of the others, you know. And then by the time 72 rolls around and David Bowie comes out with Ziggy Stardust, right? They're all like, no, 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 I want to do that. You know, the blues is old now. I want to do that. And a lot of them did. They started new wave bands and they had their hair all colored and stuff, and they were just doing what Bowie was doing in the 70s, but for the early 80s, you know. It's interesting how that dynamic happened, you know, and learning that from those guys was really interesting, you know. But you know, I want to interview people that I'm a fan of. You know, I mean, people are always making suggestions. I should talk to this person, that person. I'm like, I don't really know their work, you know, and it doesn't really resonate with me. You know, I like to talk to people that resonate with me and stuff, you know, and people that I respect, you know, or people that are related the people I respect, you know, or have been in something I can respect, you know. I mean, that's my how my criteria goes, you know. But I'm not a snob. I mean, I'll talk to stars, I'll talk to people who got out of the industry that I love and stuff, you know. I'm not a snob that way, you know. I rather talk to people who got out of the industry because they have more interesting stories, you know. They talk about, you know, being fucked over, and they talk about they tell really funny stories about stars that they worked with and everything, you know. Whereas, you know, stars are fairly political and they don't want to go there. You
What if
know?
what if I had the power to bring back someone from the dead, the
Mhm.
deceased, if and you could interview your top man and woman who's gone on to the other side. They could come back to life and you could interview 'em. Who would that be?
I interviewed Natalie Wood's sister. I would love to interview Natalie Wood if she were alive.
Oh, I would
That
love
would
to hear that story.
that would have been fantastic, you know. Who else? You know, there were several people I was in talks with of doing an interview and they died before it could happen, you know. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of some. You know, I was at a point last year in talks of doing an interview with Russ Tamblyn because he has a memoir out and stuff. And I don't know. His wife told me that his health isn't so good now and stuff, and it might not happen. And that's a real bummer. You know. Um, I don't know. I'm completely blanking on who else I'd love to
Yeah.
interview if they were alive.
I got to interview Bobby Rydell, like you probably know,
Yep, I
and
did too. Yeah.
and it's so sad that he passed away.
Yeah. Would you interview Dion DiMucci?
Who is that?
Dion DiMucci, a Dion in the Belmonts.
Yes, yes, yes.
He has a memoir out. You should reach out to him.
Really, I'll have to reach out to him. I have a
Yeah.
big crush on him.
Oh, everybody did. Yeah. I mean, he was
No, but
he
I did.
I know, but like he was a part of that, you know, late 50s, early 60s, you know, white guys doing doo-wop wave, and then, you know, being one of the pioneers of rock and roll. I know that he was supposed to get on the plane with Buddy Holly and all of them, and then the coin toss said no, you know, which was fate, I guess.
Wow. Wow. Who's your
Yeah.
favorite actress that's actor or actress that passed on you'd like to interview if they came back from the dead?
Well, Natalie Wood, like I
Oh yeah.
said.
Okay, guy. A
Yeah.
guy that you'd like to.
Guy.
I
Cary
get it.
Grant.
Ooh, what would you ask him?
Uh, Let me see. What would I say? I would probably say sarcastically, you know, what was Randolph Scott like as a roommate? Because everybody knows that they were gay for each other, you know. You know, yeah, I wouldn't say it directly because you know he sued Chevy Chase for making a joke about him being gay on the Tom Snyder show back in the early '80s.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Oh, that's a famous story. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. But most people don't talk about it anymore because it's so old. Most people don't remember who Cary Grant was, but that did happen in the early 80s.
What's your favorite movie of all time? Do you like horror movies? Tell me
I
you don't.
do.
Oh,
I do. Yes.
have you ever
Well,
wanted to, what about Jamie Lee Curtis? Do you like, have you wanted to reach out or have you interviewed her?
no, no. First off, nobody has interviewed her on a podcast except for her friends because she's inaccessible for schmoes like me to reach out to. And
Oh,
yes, I would reach out to her in a heartbeat if I could. Yes, I love Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, here's some more background on Splat from the past. The podcast started out as a horror and sci-fi focused podcast only, right? And pretty soon, I had trouble getting people from the horror arena on consistently. And I got kind of bored talking just horror. So then it evolved into everything that I'm all about, old Hollywood, 80s teen sex comedy movies, rock music, sex during the month of May, sobriety, life journey, and stuff. I talk about all these things on my podcast, not just pop culture, you know. And so, I mean, I still do talk about horror, especially during Halloween season, of course. During that whole month, it's nothing but horror movie guests. And sometimes in the other parts of the year, I'll have a horror movie guest on. But for the most part, it's just everything that I'm all about now. But in the beginning, it was mostly horror people and stuff. And I got so lucky right out of the gate with it. And back then, I don't know if you've noticed this lately, but the oversaturation of the podcasting market is such, it's hard to get guests to come on a podcast anymore. Um, they are so inundated with guests, with podcasts that, a person, let's say a person like who I interviewed back in 2017, like my friend Diane Franklin, who was an 80s teen movie actress, right? She maybe did, let's say, 7 podcasts a year at that time, right? Now she's doing like 40 or 50, if that. And it's hard to get someone like her on. It's even getting hard for me to get returning guests on because everyone in this world is becoming so depressed and sad over the political situation that they just can't bring themselves to turn on the charm, on a podcast if they're not working and stuff. It's just everybody's in reality mode right now. And I used to be able to get 4 or 5, sometimes 6 guests a week and stuff. Now I'm getting 2 or 3 if I'm lucky. And I'm bored the rest of the time when I'm not podcasting. But I'm still getting guests. I'm still lucky getting guests. But at that time, it was much easier to get anybody on a podcast because nobody had an understanding of what a podcast was yet. But now it's a big business. Zoom on during the pandemic has really made it huge. Everyone's got one now. You know.
absolutely. So, well, what's the biggest thing that you're looking forward to leaving as a legacy in this world? I ask this a lot, but like
Mhm.
you're doing the podcasting and you're getting information for people and you're stockpiling it, 2,400 interviews. What do you want to do with your all your interviews? How are you leaving the world a better place?
I hope I'm not curing cancer or anything, but I hope I'm contributing to people's lives, with the podcast. Like, so many people, everyone who has a podcast has an audience, whether it's big or small. Mine is small, and I love it that way. I hope people are tuning in and enjoying themselves and laughing their asses off. I'm sorry if I'm rehashing a lot of stuff each episode, especially when I do my nerd out episodes. I tell the same stories over and over again. Someone called me out on that just recently, and I'm like, I'm being honest. I'm trying to get a reaction from people. I like to hear different reactions of people, when I tell certain stories, or when I play my secret silly game at the end, with the same questions and answers from me, because I like to hear everyone's reactions to my answers and then the questions I ask them and then they ask back to me and stuff. I hope I'm entertaining people. That's all I can say. And I've been thinking about death a lot lately in the last few years since I've gotten diabetes. I remember after I had my car crash, right? I was like, I'm not afraid of death anymore because I've been dead. Which will bring me to my 2400th guest we need to talk about, after this anecdote, you know, and I just hope that, I can, live to be old and much greater than I am now, and, continue, being a better man and trying to, you know, accomplish more of these amazing things I've been accomplishing, meeting these stars, and just keeping their name out there, basically.
Yes, absolutely. Who was the girl in 90210 that's got a whole new, she's not wearing makeup right now, and what's her name?
90210.
Well, the babes on the beach, not 90210. What was the
Baywatch.
Baywatch? The girl in Beverly that was the hot blonde in the swimsuit, and now she's not wearing any facial makeup, and she looks fabulous for her age.
You're talking about Nicole Eggert. I got to have her on the podcast last November, and that was another favorite of mine. She is so open-minded and congenial and fun, and she's got a warped sense of humor. Her podcast is called Perfectly Twisted, which is a perfect name because she has a twisted sense of humor, and I watch it every week. And yeah, she could have makeup on or no makeup and she looks gorgeous, and she's fighting cancer too. There was a period where she was bald last year and she had was bloated. Now she's back to her normal weight, and her hair is growing out again, and she looks gorgeous. And she was a wonderful, wonderful guest. I'm going to ask her to come back on later in the year to do a nerd out with me because when she was growing up, even though she was on TV a lot, she watched a lot of TV too. And I hear her talk about it on her podcast and stuff. So I'm going to ask her back on to nerd out. I wanted to bring this up. I started doing the nerd outs at the end of 23. Another podcaster that I'm friends with, has a podcast where he does nerding out, specifically with TV guides. And even though I don't have guys like he does, right? I was like, okay, I can do a nerd out in my voice, film, television, music from childhood. I did one with you, you didn't have the knowledge that I had, but I know you had a good time, Linda. That was a lot of fun, that nerd out that we did, you
Thank
know.
you.
And yeah, I have all my favorite guests come back on and nerd out with me. Some of them, are intimidated by my knowledge. Some of them are not fully on board because they don't listen to previous nerd outs or anything, but they always come away with it having a blast. Like I just had Lori Kilmartin on this week,
I
you know.
saw.
Yeah, she didn't have a lot of knowledge like I had and stuff, but we had a fun conversation and she's hilarious. So we got to do that. And I don't know if, she was super enthusiastic about the overall experience, but I know from my point of view, it was fun, and she wasn't the worst guest I've had. I've had a lot of bad guests, but she wasn't one of them. She was fun.
Have you ever wanted to interview Seinfeld?
No. No, I've seen him do interviews. He's just very prickly. He was on Marin during the pandemic, and he gave him a hard time. I'm surprised it didn't end up like the Gallagher interview that Marin did. It was just very combative. It simmered down, but it was just like, yeah, no, I don't need Seinfeld. I can pass on that.
Yeah, well, he's a little bit different, but I was at Gotham and he was doing a set and he asked the audience if anybody had questions. So I raised my hand and he called on me and I said, "Who's your favorite person that's interviewed you?" And he said, "None of them. None of them. They all want to talk and they don't want to listen."
My God, yeah. Okay. What I just said, that applies. Yes. Oh my God. It's I'm not even gonna go further with that. That says everything right there.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's get into the biggest thing that I have. I mean, I was so jealous. when I found out, I don't get jealous often. You can ask my good friends. They know I don't get, but when I saw you were interviewing Lucille Ball's daughter,
Hmm.
I was like, oh man, I want to interview her. So I wrote, and her people said, oh, she's not doing interviews. And I said, yeah, really? I don't buy that. But anyway, you got to interview her. So let's hear about your 2400th interview. My God.
Yeah, I had been reaching out to her all year on social media, and I don't even think she read my messages. So then I went to her website and I saw that there was a form to fill out, and it goes directly to her and stuff, right? And then she passes along to her assistant for the scheduling, and that's what happened, and I did not know she was going to end up being my 2400th guest. I was wondering for a couple of weeks who's going to be my 2400th guest when it gets down to it, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've ever done a milestone interview that was a returning guest before, but I always hope it's not going to be a returning guest. I always want it to be a first time big guest whenever I do a milestone episode, right? So then when it came down to I'm days away from doing my 2400th interview, it looks like she's going to be my 2400th guest, right? So we were scheduled on a Friday and she had to reschedule for Sunday. And so I was like, oh shoot, I hope it's still going to be 2400. And then it turns out it was, right? She did end up being my 2400th guest. And so I had her on, we talked over the phone, and we talked a lot about the jazz singer because it was the 45th anniversary and I just wanted to tell her how much I love her performance in that, and just how much she makes me laugh with her facial expressions. And I told her, I said, you have your mother's comedic instinct. You just the way you can make your eyes and lips move is just hilarious. And she says to me, I grew up around so many great comedians, not just my parents, but just so many people, and I learned from watching them, so then, I didn't want to get into I Love Lucy because she's talked so much about that. I wanted to talk about other things her mom did, like Lucy in London, this special she did that was considered a disaster at the time, but now it's considered to be one of the best things she ever did. The special where she goes to swing in London in 1966, and she's there with Anthony Newley and the Dave Clark Five, and she's learning a real culture shock and like what the kids are up to and stuff. I love that special. We talked a little bit about that. We talked about her mom greenlighting Star Trek. We talked about when she worked with the Three Stooges, which led to an anecdote about her working with the Marx Brothers, which I didn't realize she worked with the Marx Brothers as well, and stuff like that,
Oh,
And
yeah,
then I
I
told
remember
her,
that clip with the Marx Brothers.
yeah, I forgot about that and
Yeah.
stuff. I had to go YouTube it, and then I've told this story a lot, but I had to tell her this story because it really did happen. When I woke up from my coma from the car accident, I told my mom, and I don't remember this. I don't remember anything until the third day, but my mom told me this on the fifth day when she came back to see me after, she was off from work. Um, I said when I woke up that I went to comedy heaven and I was greeted by Robin Williams, Lucille Ball, Joan Rivers, etc. And we went on a comedy tour, a spiritual comedy tour, where we were going to see comedy shows and we were just being, guardian angels to the comedians that were performing. And I have no memory of this, but she's told me that I said this when I got up from the coma.
Wow.
And I told her this story, and she said to me, well, you're very knowledgeable and intuitive about the history of comedy. I wouldn't be surprised if my mom and Robin greeted you at the door at the gate.
Oh,
And she's very spiritual. She was raised religious. She went to Catholic school growing up, but she's very spiritual. And so I knew she was going to get a kick out of this. So that was our closer of the podcast interview. And I was just so emotional that after she hung up, I had to compose myself for a few moments to take it in and then do my outro, you know.
that's incredible. So wonderful. Wow, I'm so glad you had that time.
It
It's
was
really
wonderful.
cute.
It was wonderful.
I told you about how I met her in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me that whole story. Like you met her at the airport, right?
Yeah, I was working at a gift shop at the Portland, Oregon airport, and I
Mm.
had finagled all of the sky caps to tell me when celebs would be coming through. Well, they didn't tell me that Lucille Ball's daughter was going to be coming through. So she came in and she was looking at paperbacks and magazines, and I was the manager of the paperbacks and magazines. I know, like that was my claim to fame. Basically, I just had to put them back when people got them out of order. And she was standing there looking and reading, and she wasn't buying, she was looking and reading. And I was pretending to clean things around her just to be around her. And then I got the courage up to talk to her. So I said, "Excuse me, but could I get an autograph of your mother from you?" She said, "No, you can't."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
she wasn't famous back then. That was the 70s, early 70s.
Her mother was famous, but she wasn't yet. I mean, she was on, one of the other Lucy show spinoffs, playing her daughter. And of course, Desi Jr. played her son on it, but she wasn't, famous as her mother, yet, you know.
Yeah.
But wow, that's cool that you had that experience. I know everyone was saying that to her back then. Can I get, your mom's autograph?
Yeah, probably. I thought I was so original.
I know that's what we think. We think we're original, and then we're not. We find out, I know. I mean, I'm always trying to find an original avenue when I interview celebrities, and sometimes I get lucky. Other times, they just treat me like another interviewer who's asked them that question before, and that bums me out. That's sad because nobody wants to do that. We do the best we can, and we do the best research that we can. I mean, when I interviewed her, there's a few things I got inaccurately, and she seemed a little bit annoyed by it, but it wasn't like harmful annoyance. It was just like, oh God, yeah, it's still out there. I've told them to erase that, on Wikipedia or whatever, but you try to be original, and just sometimes all you could do is just hope for the best.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, sometimes Googling things and researching can lead you into that's not true. And like, I hate to hear that. But
Yeah.
whatever, whatever. So, what's the most surprising thing you ever encountered in 2,400 interviews? So, shocked the heck out of you. You thought somebody was a certain way, and they weren't, or they had something shocking to tell you that you didn't. You don't go and try to make them say something, but something has had to pop out.
I remember telling you the last time about who the worst guest that I ever had was, which I won't go back and tell that story again because that was a moment in time when I told you that one and stuff. But I will tell you this. I mean, I'm at the point now where nothing shocks me anymore because I've heard everything. But like when especially when the Me Too movement first happened, women would just tell me shocking stories about being sexually harassed, right? Some women actually enjoyed it and others didn't. But the ones who didn't, the shocking, horrific things that they told me, I just could not believe. There's a couple women who called out Klaus Kinski on my podcast a few times and saying that he was literally a sociopath and just fucking crazy, and he did not care. I mean, he's a guy who would fucking be canceled today, I interviewed Doug McClure's daughter, Tony McClure, and she told me her story that was just horrific, and that's one of my most downloaded episodes too. And we talked about that and stuff, just stuff like that, But I will tell you, on a good side, things that have shocked me when I find out that certain people have a dirty sense of humor like I do, I am just blown away by it because I see their image on screen, and I just like, oh my God, I would never think that this person likes a body sex joke, and especially like former child actors who played these sweet innocent kids on TV back in the day, and now here they are older and stuff, and they're saying every curse word in the world, and I'm telling them dad jokes and they're cracking up, that kind of stuff shocks me, but only in a good way because I didn't expect that. And I'm like, okay, good. We got something on common ground here. I love that. But for the most part now, nothing really shocks me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what do you want to end this on? You get to have 2 to 5 minutes to talk to people that are watching and wrap this up your way. So it's right now it's your podcast to end it. Tell us where to follow, find you, and give us some parting thoughts, in a crazy
Yeah.
world.
Well, I'm on all social media, Facebook, Twitter X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, et cetera. And the podcast is on YouTube, audio only, black screen. And I've had some great guests the last few weeks that you should go check out. I interviewed Gene Stapleton's son, John Putch. I interviewed Robert Shaw's nephew, Chris Shaw Myers. We talked about Jaws. It's turned 50 this year. Jaws turned 50. We talked about that. I've got some great guests coming up. I've got PJ Farley from the rock band Trickster. I've got Signe Coleman, who was on the soap opera The Young and the Restless, and I know her from the Huey Lewis and the News music videos that she was on when I was a kid. I got Constance Forst Lund. She played Ginger in the Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island, and she was in The Way We Were with Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand. I got her coming up next few weeks and stuff. Just my parting thoughts are, in this fucked up crazy time that we're in, be kind to each other, listen to content that is valid, that is not misinformation, listen to my podcast if you want to hear a laugh and you want to hear, you know, useless information about pop culture of the past that you may have forgotten about or never known about. And don't forget to click button.
Don't forget what?
Don't forget to clean your belly button.
You are a belly button. What's the deal with being a belly button enthusiast?
It's just always been my favorite part of the body. It's naughty. You never know what it's going to look like on each individual until you see it. It's just I love the mystery of it. It started when I was 6 and a half with this girl that I played with in first grade. She used to let me poke hers and thump it and everything. It was a cute little Audi. It started there. And it's just kept going. you know. And I want to put this out there. I only like adult belly buttons. Okay, it's just only
You
adults.
only adult belly buttons.
Yeah, I did an episode of the podcast a few months ago where me and my friend Rachel Clark, who is the daughter of Gary Clark, who was a character actor, he died before I could have him on the podcast. And I had all three of his kids on, and me and Rachel became fast friends. She comes on a couple times a year to do like a year in review episode with me or like just do nonsense, right? And so this year's nonsense podcast we did was my love for belly buttons, and she interviewed me and asked me, the whole origin of it and like stories and everything, right? And it's a pretty funny episode. Everybody can go check out that episode. And
Wonderful.
that's all she wrote.
Super. Well, gosh, thank you so much, Tommy. Tommy Kovac, everybody. Go follow him. And he told you all his socials. Will you do me a favor once again and send me in one message all the places to follow you? Podcasts, web, everything.
I sure will. I sure will. Linda, it's always a pleasure to come on your show. And I love it when you come on my show as well. We always have a good time,
Yes.
and I just adore you and love you. And I hope one of these days we get to meet each other in person.
Me too. That would be great. I'll give you a kiss too, so you can say that I kissed you.
Yep. Mwah.
I kiss good for my age.
Ooh, don't get me excited now. It's too early for that.
See you later, and thank you so much, Tommy Kovac.
Bye, Linda. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.